Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us this morning for the latest in the Maritime Security Dialogue series. This is an ongoing series at CSIS exploring big issues in maritime, Navy, Marine Corps, Coast Guard, and we're so glad that you've joined us. And we're very appreciative that this series is supported by and able to happen due to support from our sponsors, Lockheed Martin and Huntington Ingalls Industries. Before we get into the fun part of this morning, it's a very distinguished crowd, by the way, and I see Senator Lugar has joined us, and I appreciate you being here and a lot of other luminaries in the room. Before we get to the fun part, just briefly, our standard security announcement. We obviously don't expect anything to happen, but if something were to happen, I'll be your security officer and I will guide you as to how to safely exit the room, which will either be out the back the way you came in, or if that is not the most logical path, then we'll go out the rear here. We'll exit the building and go towards one of two rally points, which if we need to do that, I'll let you know which one is the right one. And of course, we don't anticipate that that'll happen. As is the case with many of our maritime security dialogues, we have the director of the U.S. Naval Institute, Rear Admiral retired Daly, here to introduce our speaker. We're really excited to have Admiral Girrier here to talk to us about his role, which is new, in oversight of unmanned systems. And to really let you know what a phenomenal naval officer you have to talk to you today, let me turn the podium over to Admiral Daly.
Thank you. Good morning. Pete Daly, CEO of the Naval Institute. Senator Lugar, good morning. The Naval Institute and CSIS are very proud to kick off another year of the Maritime Security Dialogue, which is a joint venture between our two organizations. And as Andrew mentioned, we couldn't do it without the sponsorship of Lockheed Martin and Huntington Ingalls, for which we're very grateful. Andrew is a senior fellow at International Security Program and director of the Defense Industrial Initiative Group here at CSIS, but we're very proud also to have our main speaker here today, who's Bob Girrier. Bob's a career surface officer who's commanded at all levels. He was the CEO of the USS Guardian, CEO of the guided missile destroyer Roosevelt. He commanded our forward deployed destroyer squadron, Desron 15 in Yokosuka, Japan. Speaking of Japan, he also, as Carrier Strike Group Commander for the Ronald Reagan Strike Group, provided the support when the event occurred in Japan with the reactors at Fukushima, Operation Tomodachi, and provided essential support. He later commanded the Nimitz Strike Group as well. So he's had the distinguished CV with two carrier strike groups included. I also see several other friends in the audience today, so I'll keep it short. But I want to wrap up here by saying that Admiral Girrier most recently came from Hawaii, where he was first the J3 to Pacific Command and then served as a deputy commander at PAC Fleet. He is now the director for Unmanned Warfare Systems, OPNAV N99, and he has a lot to tell us about that newly established organization and its charter today. So I welcome a friend, an author for the Naval Institute who co-authors 3 of our books, Command at Sea, Division Officer's Guide, Watch Officer's Guide, and again, a friend, Bob Girrier.
Admiral, thanks. Admiral Daly, thanks very much. Everyone hear me okay in the room? That's good. I'm going to walk around a little bit, so just, I promise I won't move too quickly, and I'll probably come off the podium so I don't fall. But it's a pleasure to be here this morning, again, for this co-hosted event by the Naval Institute and CSIS. Senator, it's a pleasure and, again, an honor to be able to address this distinguished group. I started out the job in N99 in the OPNAV staff just this fall, and it's invigorating, it's exciting, And I have to say, it's quite necessary. It comes at a time when you look at so much change happening in the world around us and what technology has enabled. And so it's an example of where the Secretary and the CNO got together, looked at the landscape around us and said, we need to start reorganizing to be better prepared to meet the challenges in the world around us today. So today's subject and discussion is about our unmanned vision and where we're going. And I'm taking this as an opportunity to share with you, how I think about the job, how we almost deconstruct the world we're living in today. So let's just go to the next slide if we could. So I just want to start something very, very, very simple here, looking at the world. And depending on who you are, where you've been, what you do, your mind writes things on this map. Now, I'll tell you what I see. I see sea lines of communication. I see vast distances, which are significant challenges for logistics. Contested regions, areas where international law and norms, customs are being challenged. You see conflict. It's a playing field, if you will, for a lot of change. And again, you'll have your own conclusions based on your own experiences. We in the Navy only have so many ships, submarines, aircraft carriers, to cover all that distance. So what jumps off the page for me is the very evident challenges that we're faced in this growing world, this increasingly dangerous, unpredictable world, in capacity and capability. Those are challenges for our existing force of so many ships, aircraft, submarines. So what jumps off the page is how unmanned systems and all those domains can help us. They're obvious, they're clear amplifiers, complements. So that's my opening line, if you will, to kind of set the stage for a very natural fit for unmanned systems and how we need to think about them in every element, in every domain, in every community, how they can help us. You hear the Secretary of Defense and Deputy Secretary of Defense talk about the third offset strategy and human-machine teaming. We'll talk about some of those elements as we work our way towards understanding what that really is and how we leverage and harness the capability of technology. So let's go on to the next slide here. I want to start off a little bit by telling you about our organization, N99. I'll make this brief. It's a little bit of a busy slide, but it's always helpful, I think, to give you some context of where we operate, and I'll do that in a couple of slides just to kind of orient you. That green section in the middle, that's our focus in N99 and the unmanned systems. Again, I work in the directorate for the CNO. We call it the high nines, if you will. There's different warfare sponsors that have been parsed by communities, aviation, submarines, expeditionary warfare, surface. And so there we are in N99, and we're in that 6.4 budget line for those of you that understand those things. And what's more important is about the technology and how that fits in on here. On the left side, you've got S&T initiatives. And so we look at those initiatives that are ripe, that are coming to fruition. And we look at demonstrating those things with the fleet in fleet concentration areas, prototyping them in a systematic method. Help accelerate them to get them into the fleet, if you will. And those green arrows go in two directions. One, it could be acquisition. The other one, right to the fleet, a leave behind, if you will, from a prototype. So what you're seeing is the beginning of a new idea of not all things need to get into the fleet through a routinized acquisition process. That's one for sure, and I'm not here to take it on and rewire it. But there are other ways that we can also get rapid things, rapidly developed technologies, prototypes demonstrated, and then into the fleet quickly. So that's a big part of what we do. Next slide. We have a process that goes along with that. I just explained that context. We call it a rapid development process, and it's about keeping your ear to the ground and listening to what the warfighting needs are from the fleets. And this is a cycle that we run every year, and essentially it'll become continuous. We're in it right now as we speak. Stood up the division just again in September, put out a data call to the fleet, went to Fleet Forces and Pacific Fleet, all the operational stakeholders, and said, what are your primary gaps that you've got in warfighting areas, needs that you have, that you think unmanned systems could help out in, and probably could get an answer to within 2 years, inside 2 years. Please rack and stack those. Send them back to us. I got them before Christmas. Then we harness the Naval Research and Development Establishment, and they have cross-connects with industry as well. Don't ever forget that. To look at all the budding technologies you saw in that funnel. Where are those ripe technologies that might fit those racked and stacked requirements, needs, gaps? And we're literally in the process of doing that right now. Teams gathered from across the country, warfighting centers, warfare development centers, fleet forces, Pacific Fleet. Their reps are meeting at Carter Rock actually this week, despite the snow. Weeks prior, we even did a workshop prior to lead up to that. So we're moving out. At the end of that process, we'll come up with a rack and stack matching of right technologies with those needs. I'll take some of the funding that I have available, that 6.4 funding for prototyping and demonstrating. I'll have an expedited board process where I inform leadership of our intentions to move out with some of these demonstrations that will then see fruition within, again, a 2-year period. And we'll continually run this cycle. You know, what's different about this? Has this happened in the past? Yes, it's happened in the past. I would offer it in a more ad hoc nature. What's different about this is it's now focused, and we're making it a routine process because we need to. At the end of those demonstrations, acquire, refine, or terminate. Terminate's okay. It wasn't quite what we thought it was. Maybe send it back. Is this really what you needed, fleet? Because we couldn't quite make that requirement in terms of timeliness or whatever that might be. We could do this, you know, or they said, and then maybe there's an adjustment there. Maybe there's a realization that a new technology can maybe replace it instead. You know, the fact of the matter is, it's a tighter loop, a faster process. It's inclusive. It's a continuous dialogue with the fleet, with those requirements, with the research and development establishment. It's teams put it together in a routinized method. And so you have this system now that runs much, much faster. Again, not a replacement for our acquisition process that runs separately. But there's room for this. There's need for this. And technology is enabling this. Next slide. An example of you know, maybe for more context, just to give you an idea of where things kind of fit in. And this is not an indictment. If it takes decades to build a platform, right, the blue one on the top there, here's where I'll use my laser pointer. We'll see if it works here. There you go. If it takes decades for platforms, and that's not an indictment, by the way. We've built some incredible platforms. Whether they're Virginia-class submarines, aircraft carriers, you name it. It takes time. Vehicles, more on the span of years, and then payloads, months. And so you think about where's that sweet spot where N99 can help out? Well, I think it's in this area where you've got evolving payloads that are now, we're talking in terms of months here. And you match them up and host them on vehicles that are maybe repurposed, that you already have out in the fleet that are proven, with a different purpose, because the technology has enabled it, because maybe it's lighter, smaller, energy package can do more, there's a relevant mission you can repurpose it to, host it on a larger platform. These are the kinds of things we're thinking about, we're going to start doing, getting out to the fleet, demonstrate it. So there's a path there that's not decades, it's not years. It's leveraging this reality of things that are available that we're seeing. Well, how many quadcopters did you have on your Christmas list, right? You know, I look at an advertisement streaming video just the other night of a nano copter, lands in your hand, GPS enabled, Bluetooth, tracks you while you're riding your bicycle for your pictures. I mean, unbelievable. It's out there. Kids playing with it, taking pictures of their, playing with their dog there on the lawn. This stuff's out there, and it's accelerating. We talk about Moore's Law. We talk about technology. You see the prices of laptops and capabilities increasing, prices going down for those types of consumer products. You know, it means something. So there's an application of that of that essence here in what we do in the business of defense. Next slide. I'd offer there's more to what we do also. It's in the thinking part about how we think about unmanned systems and how we're organized in the Navy. One of the first things I did when I got to the Navy staff, and let me just orient you here. This is just kind of a way of thinking about guidance and strategy. National Defense Strategy, Military Strategy, Defense Planning Guidance, Cooperative Strategy for 21st Century Sea Power, revised, CNO's design he just rolled out. You know, these things nest, they're guided, that's how we work. Then you have in our N9 organization how we think about warfighting. And we're products, again, of how we've operated before. I already mentioned, I'm 99. There's a spare number left out, right? Because you had a 98. Who's that? That's air warfare, right? There they are. They talk about air wing in the future. Good thing. Again, no indictments here, by the way. These are all good things. The question you have to ask is, how are they all linked together? And you see N99. I put it in the middle. I had to. Doesn't mean it's in the middle. I'd offer it's pervasive, okay? It's pervasive. Those lightning bolts simply connecting, they apply. Increasingly, the larger story of how we fight and win and prevail with an adversary is how these concepts, distributed lethality, you've heard Vice Admiral Roden talk about that, undersea dominance, ship-to-objective maneuver, all these things are good. They're all netted to a larger purpose. Unmanned plays a big role in that. So part of the thinking that the CNO, SecNav, have asked us to do in the N99 shop is to change, to broaden the aperture about how we think about warfighting, how you think about technology, how you think about innovation, how you think about how science has brought these things into our hands and you use them. Not at odds with the existing force structure that we've already invested in, but how you amplify it. Go back to that initial picture of the world. So much to do, such a large place, so many challenges in capacity and capability. There's an incredible role I'd offer not as a substitute, but as a complement to our existing forces. There's more to this. Naval, by the way, blue-green team there. As we design these systems and we think about them, well, who do they need to operate with? Well, the joint force. And as you think beyond that, who else is out there? Well, maybe it's blue-green, there's purple there, joint outside it. There's allies in green, there's partners. So as you design systems and think about interoperability, leveraging all those things that are important, you know, the power and capabilities of like-minded countries and how we can team together efficiently. So you start plumbing the system, thinking about how you use unmanned systems and all of our investments from the ground up to get the most out of them. Not at odds with the existing system, but really how you need to evolve. So again, purpose today is to share with you how we're thinking. And yes, it's evolving as I go. But it hasn't radically changed from this initial picture. And my mission is to keep spreading this. Next slide, please. So as you're charged with getting it right, plumbing the system, if you will, to maximize the use of unmanned systems, I think you have to kind of strip away, you know, many of the things that we currently work with. Again, not cast them aside, but you need to think through them and understand in the end, what do you have to get done? What do you want? What do you want our force to be? And I think it's got to do those things, right? Is anything in there objectionable? If you can do those things better than your adversary, you're going to win. I really believe that. So therefore, you think about, okay, how can unmanned systems help us do those essential main things without being caught up in specific domains, but working through them? And how do you continuously learn? I mean, this is the cusp of where we are about leveraging the power of machines and what they can do for us. You talk about fighting at machine speed. What does that mean? Well, it means you do this quicker than your opponent does. And I'd offer you do it in collaboration with machines, you being people, humans. And we can have a great discussion with people. It's already out there about what does that look like? What does that future look like? Is it Skynet? Is it swarms? Is it the centaur model? And I'd offer it probably is more along the centaur model of how you team with machines to get the best out of both. That truly is a greater thing than the sum of its components. So we deconstruct it in this way. So next I want to run through just a couple of slides that kind of walk through how we can think about machines differently, how you can think about autonomy and even artificial intelligence to get the most out of it in our operations, in our applications in warfighting. Again, 99, my charge is not air, submarine, subsurface, surface. It's all of them and how it relates to getting this done as a system of systems that's tough, that can handle degradations, challenges, that in the end thinks faster, responds quicker than an adversary. So next slide. So let's start out with, these are just bars about continuums. Call them lines of effort, lines of operation. We'll start from the top down. So I'd offer the top line there, I call that a continuum of cognition. So the question, the charge to us is, how can you use machines to give you more than just zeros and ones? And when we do it in real life, every day to day. But you have to ask yourself in every question, every community, am I using that machine the best way I could? Or is there a better purpose yet to be invented, but a demand signal I should create that gets more out of zeros and ones? There's a complexity there, right? Data, zeros and ones, put it together, you get information, give context, it's knowledge, patterns of life, wisdom. So where do you stop? I'd offer wisdom, that's a province of humans, collective experience over time. That's the part where, okay, I got what machines do well, now I want to leverage what humans do well at the creativity part, the wisdom, if you will, experience. So there's a continuum there, and there's a role. And I'm not here to say that machines need to go all the way right. No, far from it. I think get them into knowledge, yes, help build knowledge. As you really, but always a command feature there, I think, stays with the human. But increasingly, we can give control to certain events. The next line, about things we do. Actions more simplistic, simple, turn left, turn right, and autopilot, if you will. We've evolved over decades. To more complex activities, right? And then ops, we just have to add them all together. So we can certainly do more with machines along that continuum. And again, I think control, we can do more things with having machines control activities. Never ceding, though, the command element. The human piece has got to be in there. That's certainly what we're advocating, and I've yet to see anyone challenge that. It makes the most sense. It's very much, I think, in our DNA, quite literally. Next slide. So let's just break apart even some more. Operations and that whole line, doing things. And we all know it's a little bit of a euphemism when we talk about unmanned systems. Yeah, that's not really unmanned because there's a whole lot of folks back there doing, like breaking apart a mission. That's that bar up top. And when you're out there doing something, some operation, well, there's a lot of pieces. You got to plan it, the actual execution, how you get the data coming in, the thing that you're doing out there, collecting it, where you collect it, then how you think about it. Those of you that are familiar with the intelligence world, and we call it PED, right? Processing. I'm going to forget this now, right? This is great. Extracting, dissemination, and that's exploitation. Thank you very much. You use these acronyms so often, right? And that can take days, based on the amount you're sucking in, right? So can machines do it faster? Are they already doing it faster in some areas? Yes. Are we mainstreaming that application enough? So, the vision, in a very systematic way, where can we use machines, computers, to help go through all those steps to reduce that load on manpower, to truly get more out of it? Again, as I said earlier, I don't ever expect the human element to be completely absent. There will always be a command element in there. But there's much more we can do. And in the end, what do you want? You want that actionable knowledge. You've heard that term before. Actionable intelligence, actionable knowledge. Because in the end, why do you do all this stuff? Why do we do anything out there in an operational context? It's to understand and then do something about it. Or not, depending on what your decision is. So you want to get to that thing as fast as possible, that yellow thing there. Next slide, please. Which leads us to this. These are OODA loops, right? You can't read the words, observing, orienting, deciding, acting, repeat. And the faster you do that. Not new at all. I put the red one there as an adversary, and the ideal is that you want to be able to do a tighter turning circle than your adversary. So the point is, if we do this right, those imperatives I talked about in that slide, those simple words about seeing further, acting faster, understanding, essentially it is nothing more than an OODA loop. Ultimately, you want to get it inside the adversary. Of course. And that guides your action. This is the best use. This is the essence of human-machine teaming. This is the essence, I'd offer, of fighting at machine speed and beating an opponent who's trying to get to it first, if you will, hit the objective, whatever it might be. It's all about that. And that takes place in different domains. Air, sea, undersea. But it really does get to that. So I've asked our team to think about how you look at unmanned systems and you apply that goal and that end state to what we do. Where can we help out? Whether it be in submarines, undersea, whether it be in surveillance, surface operations, surface ship operations, aircraft, doesn't matter, space, any domain. This is applicable through all. Next slide. There's more. How much is enough? Need it be force on force? Well, maybe. But if you're thinking fast enough, you avoid that. You pick the time of your choosing. That's the smarter opponent, if you will. How much is enough? I put dollar signs in there in a generic sense. Overmatches the notion of just the right amount of power, force, at just the right place to achieve the right objective, even in terms of time. Superiority, more of that for a longer period, larger area. Supremacy, longer standing, the continuum is the same. But when you're being contested, these things are costly, not just in terms of dollars, but in terms of effort, expenditure, how you're using your resources. Limited resources, go back to that picture of the world. Only got so much to do things, all we got to do. How much is enough? How much can you leverage unmanned systems to understand the theater, build an awareness, an architecture that you then can move those OODA loops fast and achieve your desired end state quicker. And then lastly, risk. And this is really tremendous. I think we need to go back and look at risk and how we think about risk. And there's lots of great lessons we've learned in the various communities through trial and error, and we have created systems and regulations, good ones, for manned systems to avoid disasters and things we've learned the hard way. Now enter unmanned systems. So you remove the human element, or part of the human element, certainly the proximal one in the vehicle or thing itself, and I think that reopens that discussion. Doesn't mean you throw it out as it applies to manned platforms, but you need to think about how you think about risk. You do. Because machines that are unmanned, that don't hold humans at risk in them while they're doing their activity, gives you more opportunity. So we're foolish not to relook at risk in that application. Much, much more opportunity there of the types of missions we may ask unmanned systems to take. And then in the end, if you use them right, that whole system we talked about, how you come with decisions faster, if you use it right, you buy yourself more time. You can create, you build sanctuary, you build decision space, you build opportunity, you reduce risk. So risk factors into almost every element of how you think about unmanned systems, I'd offer. Next. What do we got here? 5 different areas. For those that are saying, okay, you're talking kind of ethereal things, ideas, concepts, but they're important because it sets the stage for how you approach this larger issue of how you factor unmanned systems in. And here's just 5 different bins of where we can get more bang with unmanned systems in the near term and where we need to go. Autonomy, machine intelligence. And these all map back to those other lines of operation, lines of effort I talked about in an earlier slide. Where we are now, I'm working my way down from the middle column there from top to bottom. Lower complexity, lower threats to the higher complexity. This is how you have more trust. And that's a key piece we haven't talked about yet. But as you work with these systems more and more, as you try to attain that optimum human-machine teaming, a key piece is trust. Trust in what? Trust the machine's going to do the thing you need it to do. And so that needs to evolve incrementally as we try them out, use them, build better algorithms. And again, pieces of this we've already played out with, in specific pockets. Let's talk about our Aegis weapon system on Navy ships. There's elements of that automated system, incredibly powerful. Been around now for decades. So these are not incredibly brand new ideas, but it's about how you think about them now in a completely horizontal, cross-connected method and repeat it, get it out there. And this is how you break it down into different pieces where they can help you. Well, we didn't pursue this area before because the technology, the battery life just isn't there yet. The battery life's not there, but it's getting better. So you see, again, the technology's allowing these things. So the endurance piece is the next one. It only lasted a few minutes to hours, so you didn't pursue it. But now you can, because the technology is evolving rapidly. And the density of these energy sources are getting smaller. I go back to that nanocopter I saw on the video landing in a child's hand. Pretty powerful stuff. We weren't even thinking about it. We weren't even talking about it a year or two ago. Common control system. Not very sexy, but boy, really important. So how do you plan and interface and plug and play, if you will, there's a good analogy, with all these unmanned systems? That's something we have to figure out and get out there mainstream. Because if you want to realize the full potential of unmanned systems enabling our ships, aircraft, submarines, everywhere they operate, you have to come up with some baseline. Plug and play, things that grow, things that have modularity, open architecture systems that can be adapted and can spiral. These are all things we have to plumb in now. And those are the features that you'll see that we'll be pushing. Take what's out there that works, make sure it can plug and play to a common grid, if you will, common control system, but still has the ability to spiral, leveraging open architectures. Going back just briefly to the endurance, days to weeks, again, weeks to months, no joke. And some of you, depending on your communities, your industries, this is out there. This technology is already out there. These long dwell systems. The energy sources are now available, and they're getting better all the time. So now you start thinking more and more, wow, these things can help. They can help do a mission that I had this very expensive submarine do, tied them up, or I'm doing something else. Lots of application there. Sensors and weapons, again. As our trust increases, as the algorithms get more sophisticated and proven and tested and used, you trust them to do more things with human control. Next slide. So in the end, that's our vision. And the key piece in the middle there, that team with the warfighter, is, and you hear it in DepSecDef and SecDef's speeches about third offset. It is the future. It is not at the expense of, it is not in replacement of, it is a complement to. Because we can now with technology and do it right. Different countries are going to come up with different solutions. Their values will drive them in different directions. And I'm very confident just seeing how we operate, what we value, our people, the creativity, the innovativeness that we hold in our own people, that this teaming idea is a winner. It takes the best of what we do as humans, which operate well in chaotic environments, leveraging wisdom, experience, and you match that with things that are more deterministic, that machines can do very well, calculations, quickly, mash those two together, you get a winning team. And so, as I mentioned in the beginning, I continue like to challenge. I have a very small team in N99, and we continually challenge our assumptions as we're going forward. Is this making sense? Is this too fluffy? Is this past the sniff test? And so last night, I was at the Naval Academy for their service selection night for surface warfare. And so you can't help it but think, as they're incredibly bright, vibrant youth, our future, selecting with great passion their ships and their first initial assignments that they'll be reporting to in as few as 7 months. And the excitement and the energy. And I'm thinking all these thoughts. How does that match up? And I got to tell you, it matches up perfectly. I think of it as a fusion of technology and talent that we're so darn good at in this country. And so I believe every ounce of what I've just told you here in these last several minutes about the way ahead and how we leverage what we've done, what we've got, the vitality of our people, and how you couple them and team them together with technology. It's pretty powerful to build winning teams. So that was what I wanted to share with you this morning, and I think we have some time for some questions. Is that the plan? All right, thanks. And I didn't laze anybody. That's always a good thing.
Much appreciated. We didn't have to rush out the back. Well, Admiral, it's abundantly clear why you were selected for this job, and the combination you bring to it of passion, intellect, and just a way to think through these problems deeply, which I think is really important when an organization is new, to really think through what is its purpose, how does it nest and integrate strategically and operationally with the other organizations, obviously, in the Navy. So that's great to see. I'm just going to ask a couple of questions because we have, as I mentioned, a very distinguished audience, and there's always phenomenal questions that we get from our guests. And the interesting thing is that just about every question I had prepared, you have already answered, so, or at least addressed in some way. But there's a couple that I wanted to dig on a little. And the first really got to that issue of nesting and how N99 nests within the larger Navy family. And I kind of wanted to ask you, and you have addressed it, but I want to better understand how you think through what constitutes your scope of unmanned within these other ways of thinking about these aspects of the system: the payloads, the sensors, the propulsion system, the control logic that drives the control system, the sensors. Kind of how deeply do you need to go into those various aspects of an unmanned system, vice those other encodes that have some role as well in those areas?
Well, great question, and actually, there's great value, I think, in going back over some of these to dig deeper and give you the next level of specificity. So when I first took over the job, people said, "Hey, good luck with that baby. They're going to kill it in the cradle. They're going to see it as a threat." And so, you have all these powerful, well-established communities that are out there that have their things, their platforms. And then the answer is, no, it's not that at all. I am a necessary, essential complement. So how do I see ourselves in N99 nesting in the larger OPNAV organization, the other communities? The answer is we're the necessary complement. So my value, our value, and I tell this to our group all the time, is not at the expense of them, it's just the other. This is what vexes you: surface warfare, air warfare, submarine. How can we help? It goes back to that other picture. Lots to do. Capability, capacity shortfalls. What niches can we help out? And so that requires a deep relationship with all of them. So I think, at least since I've joined the team, the larger OPNAV team for working for CNO, we've engaged in a continuous, I think, very rich and thoughtful dialogue about where unmanned can help out. Again, not at the expense. You've got significant investments that are already out there in tremendously capable platforms. It goes back to the platforms, vehicles, payloads. There's a sweet spot in there where we can fit in and help out. So again, I think unmanned is that thing that exists in between all, as an amplifier, as a supplement. It gets more bang out of them, gets more coverage out of it. So there's natural, they're not enemies, adversaries, whatever word you choose, competitors, scarce dollars. Just turn it on its head. We're natural allies to help them get it done. And that's really, that's our stock in trade. So even more level of detail, if you'd like. So the specifics of how we operate. I talked about that 6.4 funding. So one of my missions, there's really two big areas. One is that rapid prototyping cycle we talked about. The other, and inherent to that, I didn't point it out on the slide, but that's just pre-milestone B. Now it's again acquisition and requirements talk. But part of my mission is to help take technologies that are pre-milestone B, meaning there's still some risk and you're not ready to go to full rate production, and help get it there. Stand up an office, N99, that thinks only about unmanned systems and how they can help other areas, not as adjuncts to an existing that may get cut off because you're in the budget. I'd rather have one more platform than this particular additive. So you cut it routinely. So this is again I think the wisdom of the secretaries and CNO's approach. And I'm not saying that as a gratuitous comment in the slightest. It's about if you want to advocate for unmanned systems and get them moving forward, then create an entity that thinks about it all the time and how it fits in and champions it. And there you have it. So on those multiple levels, I say natural ally to help them get the job done.
Great. You also talked a little bit about some of the inherent advantages of unmanned systems. You talked a bit about speed and able to shrink a tighter turn of the OODA loop, and then you also talked about cost and being able to achieve overmatch or superiority or supremacy potentially at lower cost. I want to dig a little bit on certainly on that cost issue, because it's something that I think that's very much under discussion, and particularly in the Air Force context, but relevant more broadly. As you talked about, all these systems, there's manpower out there somewhere supporting the operation of those systems. And so there's been a bit of a debate about just how much cheaper is unmanned really than manned. At some level, obviously, it is cheaper. A Scan Eagle is cheaper than F-18 if you're trying to send something out. There's not much dispute about that. But from a larger operational context, if you're thinking of a completely unmanned approach towards a major mission, is that really cheaper? I was just interested how you think about that cost equation and how it breaks down.
So as I've outlined, I think clearly, I think there's value in going back to that slide where we talked about taking a mission and breaking it down into its entities, about mission planning and execution and then the data and how you extract it and think about it and disseminate it, analyze it. Different services have had different approaches. You had to start somewhere. I surmise that there'll be a convergence on how we think about as you revisit earlier decisions. So I'll just speak about how we in our office think about it. I think inherent to unmanned are tremendous savings. It's intuitive. Yes, you can come up with examples where, geez, a lot of people there to tally up the dollars. Yeah, you're right. It may be suboptimal in some areas and instances you point out. But I think there's a larger imperative, and it's intuitive, that if you do it right, and we'll continually evolve. This is, again, you talk about learning systems. The system itself needs to learn, but we as users of the system need to learn as well and continually refine it. I think you'll see a convergence that makes this beyond a doubt, that there are inherent savings. The technology is driving us in that direction. And clearly you can see how that's something in our back of our mind. I mean, I created that slide. We huddled around a desk and started, I want to make the point that there's, to get beyond just thoughts and talk about definitive things. Hey, what do you want industry to focus on? Well, help us in these areas. Get the people out of that. Not entirely out of it. You still have that command piece, which is very important. It's a philosophical, very important issue. But there's a way to do it smartly. And again, let the machines do what they can do really well. So there are savings. To me, it's intuitive. You can show areas where there clearly are savings. You can also come up with examples where there haven't been as much. I think you'll find those areas will evolve pretty quickly to say, geez, there's a better way to do this. You know, you talk about different levels of human-machine interaction. You know, and there's, you know, I'd offer there's human, you know, control, if you will, that's very rudimentary. You know, you can map waypoints out, you drive at collision avoidance. Then there's more of a supervisory control, and ultimately there's teaming. There's literally different levels. You get into the teaming concept, even the supervisory level, where you just simply give a mission order or an objective, and then the machine figures out the plan. Here's the best way to cover that area. I don't need you to give me waypoints because they can figure it out. The Roomba that you buy to clean your rug already has logics in it right now that as it moves around, it learns as it explores your living room space and figures out where it's been and where it needs to go. And I'd argue, I'm going to get in real big trouble here how often I vacuum the floor. You know, it's probably a heck of a lot more efficient. It doesn't cover the same spot 16 times because it's easy. You know, it gets in there around the legs of the chairs and so forth. But I mean, no kidding, this technology's there. And so it's already playing out. And so I think you'll see applications over and over again. Yeah, even in mission planning. And you get to the teaming concept, you know, it sounds pretty vague and out there. No, I'm going to give goals. I mean, you can talk about initial waypoints, that's very directive. That's more hands-on, supervisory. And then largely to goals. And you hook up, you give some basic, you know, ROE, some basic, you know, if-then statements. That border, that bound what you want this thing to do. So you maintain that human command element in it. And then with that will come, again, as you build trust and you understand how these work, your ability to control multiple systems. And with that comes a tremendous leveraging. And then I think it'll be no doubt in anyone's mind of the savings.
And just one last maybe follow-up to that, and then I'll turn to our audience. You had a slide where you talked about systems, you know, mid to near term being kind of sea-based or very much tied to, in terms of C2 and comms, tied to the ships, tied to space assets, and then in the longer term becoming a bit more independent as they have increased endurance and better comms capacity. And that raises an interesting question. So, you know, a UAV or UUV that's tied directly to a ship, I understand why that's part of the naval force because it's tied to the ship, which is part of the naval force. I think of an asset like Triton, which is part of the naval force, but which is primarily land-based, and you know, the missions that it's assigned may be very much maritime missions, but you reach a point as you get out to systems that are longer range and more autonomous where someone says, well, is that a naval system? Is it an Air Force system? Is it something in between? How do you think through that? You know, how does something specifically as a naval system when it's an unmanned system?
Well, I think you're going to start seeing, you know, boundaries start to dissolve, you know, the more you get into this. You know, we organize ourselves logically, quite logically, over time, based on expertise, portfolios. You have to focus. It drives focus. You know, as we look at capabilities increasing, as we see the increasingly interconnectedness of things, right, and information, and how they all relate, and how the need for speed, and this rapid processing, everything's connected. Whenever you come up to a boundary, you know, a seam, it slows things down. I mean, to me, that's one of the realisms. You know, hence the point about, you know, as we design, as we plumb these systems, you think naval, not just Navy, by the way, blue-green to joint, to allies, to partners. So you have this ability to cross-connect. And inherent to all those spheres in that onion kind of chart, it's all cross-domain. You know, the domain's not the main thing. The domain is an enabler. The domain is where the thing, the vehicle, the what plays out. It's increasingly about how and how fast for that larger end state. So I think there's a greater realization of cross boundaries. Certainly services will host systems and platforms. Our ability to use them, you know, cross boundaries, cross domains, increases their utility, increases their usability, and efficacy. And so I think growing trends. I mean, and everyone's seeing this. You know, a Triton teaming with a P-8 is a pretty powerful thing. It's certainly a maritime application. P-8 goes off station. Triton stays out there, takes care of some areas that it maintains awareness. T-8 comes back on station, plugs in, looks over more areas. And there's incredible teaming that can happen here. You know, that traverses the littoral, the open ocean area. So just big gains across the board, in my view.
Thank you. I want to open up to our audience. If you would like to ask a question, please raise your hand. Someone will bring a mic to you, which will help our online audience hear you. So please do wait for the mic. And I always start with someone in front, which of course tells you who sits in front. But let's start here with
Sidney Friedberg, Breaking Defense. I really liked your Skynet Swarms and Centaurs trifecta. Your neighbor over in 6.1, 6.2, and 6.3 funding, Admiral Winter, said the other day, you know, we're very much synced up with the offset strategy, which you of course mentioned, and you know, of the various things the Navy can bring that sort of are unique to the offset, sort of their unique value added, is not just unmanned, but unmanned underwater systems, since nobody else does that. And I wanted to ask, you know, from your perspective over in the 6.4 world, which is again adjacent, you know, what is the potential for unmanned underwater in particular? What are you guys looking at in that field? And how are you syncing up your efforts with this department-wide effort on the so-called third offset strategy?
Well, thanks, great questions. And you know, I coordinate with Matt Winter continuously, Office of Naval Research. So I think incredible opportunities in the undersea domain, really big ones. Again, you talk about our submarines, our platforms, and how capable they are, and how expensive they are, and how precious their time is, and again, the vastness of the ocean spaces and all that space you need to cover. I can think of so many missions that unmanned systems can help out. You know, in the past, you've often heard the euphemism dull, dirty, and dangerous missions. You know, are the obvious, perhaps, first area where you might go. You know, if you want to maybe survey the bottoms and, you know, see what the environment looks like. Is it better to use an expensive submarine that can do many other things for you, or is it better to use a smaller unmanned vehicle that can do it and then come back and give you the data, and you know, you got a better map of what the bottom looks like? You know, there's an obvious application there. And then you talk about, well, you know, how deep you want to go. Do you want to launch that thing from a submarine, or do you want to launch it from a boat? Do you want to use it in a mine warfare application? So then that speaks to the sizes of these things. So now you get into an area where there's the families. There's smaller ones, medium-sized ones, larger ones. Is there opportunity for them to work independently as a sensor, or is there a possibility to work with them that maybe now are hosted by platforms that can take them somewhere? So as you're developing energy packages and long, higher endurance, maybe you need a platform to host it. But that doesn't mean you exclusively do that. Maybe even larger UUVs that now can leave from a pier and go longer distances and do entire missions, and then check back to you when you want. So I see, you know, in all different categories, many applications. And all of these things nest directly into, we talk about third offset, how you take these unmanned systems and you team them with platforms, give them direction, have them do things, report back, get stuff done. Capacity, capability, both inherently, they're both directly connected. So rich area in undersea. Our charge in N99 is to look at all of this. Again, we're, you know, go back to that earlier kind of cloud slide, you know, we're looking at undersea. I have a very rich dialogue with N97 and the submarine community, and of course the fleet as well. They bring up their requirements and needs. Great question.
I'll go over to this side of the room and up here.
Sir, Mark Converse, Cypress International. So now that you have some insight into the 16 and 17 budgets, can you give us a little idea about what's coming up next 12 to 18 months in those prototype demonstrations?
So thanks for asking that, Mark. You know, I'm not going to get into specifics of the 17 budget. That's going to be rolled out here in short order, and there's plenty associated with that. I can tell you that we're hard at it right now in that rapid demonstration and prototyping process. As I mentioned, I've got a team that we're plugged in with, actually working at Carter Rock literally as we speak. Despite the snow coming from all over the country, matching up the warfighting needs and gaps with technologies that they know. And they're coming from all the different communities and warfare centers. They're together with warfighting development centers, those are fleet representatives, to working through this. And I've got some FY16 funds that will then get matched to those demonstration and prototyping events. And as those things prove out, we'll get them into the hands of the fleet. In fact, part of the demonstration are, in fact, with the fleet. Those are purely in collaboration with the fleet. They're not things that are off taking place in a lab somewhere. That's part of what's unique about our process. It's at a fleet concentration site with fleet representation, with the development of CONOPS as a part of it. So there's instant relevance from the beginning of the demand signal to the demonstration itself. So I'm happy to talk about those initiatives as we're literally bringing up a list. And next week I'll be doing a selection of which ones we'll move forward with. So exciting times. More to follow in 17. Budget gets briefed formally, and I don't want to get in front of that. But thanks.
We are a little short on time, but we have a little bit of time left. So what I want to try and do is call on 2 people, get 2 questions asked, and then give you a chance to answer them both. And I think that'll probably run out our clock. So let's see. We'll go here and then here on the aisle. So please ask your question and then let the other person ask, and then we'll get an answer.
Sure.
Sure. Good morning, sir. Megan Eckstein with USNI News. You briefly mentioned the Common Control System. I read that had a successful demonstration out at Puget Sound, I think, last month. And I was wondering if you could just explain what the future development of that looks like and how you're coordinating with the different ENCODES and other parts of the Navy to develop that.
Thank you. So Common Control System.
Let's just have his second question. And then
that means I have to remember what the question was. That's okay. I can do that.
Morning, Admiral Paul Heim, WR Systems. 2-part question. One, your thoughts on precise navigation and timing for these unmanned systems, particularly in a GPS degraded or denied environment, and then some comments about cybersecurity and information assurance for the unmanned systems.
Great. Super. Can I work in reverse, starting with his before I forget his 2 quickly?
Absolutely.
Okay, PNT and cybersecurity, and then yours is CCS, don't worry. But actually, they're very aligned. You guys must have coordinated beforehand. So these things may not be that sexy topics, right, to talk about, but those folks that know their business know how darn important they are. That's the fundamental kind of backplane wiring that makes all this stuff happen. So as you move forward, you have to be very thoughtful about how we safeguard those systems, how we harden them appropriately, and how you allow them to gracefully degrade or be partitioned off. Again, not everything need to be hardened to the highest element, but you need to go through this very thoroughly and see where can things spread, where must you have fire breaks, if you will, when challenged. Because others are playing this game. As much as we've talked about today in this open forum, others are hard at it as well. And so we can be thoughtful. We get to be thoughtful too, clearly, and think about it. So these are very fundamental systems: PNT, precision navigation and timing, cybersecurity. If you're reliant on these systems and how we're currently plumbed, we know there are critical nodes. We know there are areas that are more vulnerable than others. So you get in front of that. I'd offer, as technology increases and this spiral happens, we can make stronger, tougher architectures that can degrade gracefully, that can be sectioned off, that can still allow you to fight through, if you will. So this is all, again, what technology says, oh yeah, the more you're connected, the more vulnerable you become. Well, maybe, but if you use that same technology to make your networks stronger and redundant and at multiple levels, they can become pervasive and enduring. So there's a way to do this. And so great point, and this is in the back of our mind as we move forward. Over to Common Control Station system. First of all, Common Control System for everyone, is software. It's not so much a thing as it is software. And so I go back to that discussion we had about, plug and play. To make this idea work, to mainstream these things and get beyond just charts and ideas, you have to have a common system that evolving open architecture systems can plug into rapidly, some standards. That's what CCS is about. And it has to apply to the air domain, undersea. It has to be sufficiently uniform such that you plan now that enables you to operate cross domains. So that's what CCS is all about. And that one, of all the systems that are out there and programs that I'll be interested in getting involved in, we talk about this partnership I have with the other traditional resource sponsors. You know, the vast majority of programs that we'll touch and be involved in, once we get them past that 6.4, that you know, technology vulnerable or a ripeness point where you reduced risk, you know, the vision is that we're not holding a lot of programs, you know, in the traditional sense in the N99. The traditional resource sponsors will have those, with the exception of common control systems. That one we're going to keep because it is pervasive to unmanned systems writ large, and it's that important. So we will carefully hold that and pay attention to that and ensure that it's populated undersea, surface, and air, because it's critical to making this whole thing, all this talk we've had about mainstreaming unmanned and getting these human-machine teaming right, it's critical to that. So two great questions, by the way, that really get to the business end of what we talked about today. So I thanks for the richness of that question.
Well, Admiral, we've come to the end of our hour. This has been an absolutely great discussion, great presentation, and I just want to thank you for joining us and for giving us great entertainment this morning.
Super. A pleasure to be here. Thank you.